Good morning. I'm glad you made it here on this beautiful, rainy fall day. This is one of those days that kind of just demands that you take a nap, right? So for that reason, if you need to take a nap this morning, no judgment, right? Have your snooze, whatever you have to do. If I end up taking a nap this morning, I just have one request. Just if I fall asleep, just filter out quietly, and last one out, hit the lights, okay? And we'll be all good. One of the things that a family does is a family celebrates each other. So when our brothers or sisters do something great, we want to acknowledge that. We want to recognize that. And tomorrow is Veterans Day. And we're a church that is full of veterans and people who are currently serving, and we're very appreciative of that. I love getting to be a pastor of a church like this because we get to have this great experience when a military family moves to town and they join our church, and they are amazing servants and they jump right in. And so I'm just really feel fortunate that I get to be a pastor at a church that has so many of you. But we do want to take just a moment and acknowledge and thank those of you who have served. So if you have served or are serving, or if you're the spouse of someone who has served or is serving, because you're just as much a part of it, would you just stand up just for a second and so we can say thank you to you? One of my favorite things is whenever we do this, these are the people who are always the most reluctant to stand up. And that just says something. We're very grateful for all that you've done for us. You may have heard this story before. I don't know if it's true or not. I found it on the internet, so I'm assuming it is. But there was an American businessman who was on vacation in Mexico, and he was kind of just touring around, and he found himself in this small coastal village and wanted to get the full experience. So he found a local fisherman and just said, hey, is there any way I can get like a meal? And the fisherman was glad to oblige, and he said, I'd love to. So he went out, caught him some fish, and cooked it up and gave it to him. And as the man ate it, he said, this is the most delicious meal I've ever had. I've never had anything like this. So he began to talk to the fisherman about it, and just, this is amazing. How do you do this? And he said, so, how often do you fish? And the guy was like, I fish maybe 1 or 2 mornings a week. I just get out for a little bit. And he said, okay, so what else do you do? Do you have a job? And it's like, no, that is my job. He said, well, how do you manage if that's all you fish? And he said, well, I catch enough fish to feed my family, and then I can trade some of them for the other things that we need, and we have everything we need. The guy said, well, what do you do with the rest of your time then? And the fisherman said, well, most mornings I sleep in late. If I want to fish for fun, I fish for fun. I come home, I play with my kids, I take a siesta with my wife. In the evening, we stroll down into town, and I sit around and drink tequila and play guitar with my friends. And the guy said, well, that's amazing. He's like, I just want you to know that, I'm a Harvard-educated man. I have an MBA, and I think I can really help you out. He said, you've got something amazing going on here, and I think we can probably grow it. So if you'd be willing to fish a little bit more, like if you'd be willing to fish all day, 6 days a week, I think we can really build something here. We could get you a little fish market, and you could sell fish, and you could even have a little restaurant on the side where people could eat. People would love it. Word would spread. We could grow the operation, get you a bigger boat, maybe hire some more fishermen, get you a whole fleet of boats. This thing could grow so big, you could move to Mexico City, or if it grew even more, you could move to the U.S., probably even New York. You could be the CEO of a multinational corporation that sells fish. It could be amazing. And the fisherman said, wow, we could do all of that? Well, what would we do next? And the man said, well, then eventually when you're ready, you could retire and we could sell the company. You would make millions of dollars. And the man said, wow, millions of dollars. That's amazing. What would I do with that? And the man thought for a minute. He said, well, you know what? If you had that much, I suppose you could move to a small coastal village. You could sleep in most mornings, go fishing when you want to, play with your kids, take a siesta with your wife, stroll into town in the evenings and drink tequila and play guitar with your friends. I don't know if it's true or not. I'm going to guess no. But it kind of highlights for us this really profound truth that very often the things that we chase the most are taking us away from the things we want and need the most. And the reason is because very often we lack contentment. And so I think there's this poignant question that we need to think about this morning, which is this: how much do you need to be content? Like a lot of us would be like, well, I'm almost content, right? If I just get a little bit more, then I can be content, right? If I just a little bit more money, a little bit bigger of a house, a little bit better of a car, a little bit nicer of clothes, then I would be content. You know what the reality is? You will never have enough money to be content. But with contentment, you will always have enough money. Jesus talked a lot about contentment. Jesus talked a lot about money, and he talked a lot about the relationship between the two. In one instance, he was traveling around, and a man had a question for him. This often happened to Jesus. Someone would shout out a question, and he would just answer it for them. And we see one of these stories in Luke chapter 12. So if you have your Bible, you can open to Luke chapter 12, pull it up on your phone or your tablet, and we'll put these verses up on the screen as we go. This is Luke 12:13. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Now, in that day, if you were the oldest child, you received the entire inheritance. So no matter how many kids there were, the oldest got the inheritance, and then it was up to them to decide what to do with it. They didn't have to share it. They could keep it all for themselves. Now, that seems like kind of a jerk move, but apparently that's what happened here. This is maybe the younger brother or the middle child, and he's saying, Jesus, my brother's not sharing. Make my brother share. And Jesus responds and says, but he said to him, man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you? Essentially, Jesus just says, how is this my business? You guys need to work this out on your own. I'm not going to solve this for you. But what I really want you to see is what Jesus does next. It says, and he said to them. Now, notice the first thing Jesus said, he says to him. So the man asked the question, and then Jesus responds specifically and directly to the man who asked the question. And now it says, and Jesus said to them. So what Jesus is doing is he's using this man's question as an opportunity to teach everyone. And what that really means for us is we can be included into them. So now we want to really pay attention, because what Jesus is about to say to the whole crowd, he's also saying to us. And this is what Jesus says to them. Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Jesus says, hey guys, y'all heard what this fellow over here just said. And what I want y'all to hear from me is, be careful that you don't covet. Essentially what Jesus is saying is this guy's coveting, right? He's saying, be careful. This is a warning to you. Stay away from covetousness. Now, what is covetousness? Well, coveting is essentially any time that I want something that God has given to someone else. And some might say, well, it's actually just any time you want something that someone else has, and that's true, but I don't want you to miss the point that whatever someone else has is what God has given them. Because whatever you have is what God has given you. You see, God gives different stuff to everybody. He gives different amounts, he gives different kinds, but God gives different things to everyone. Some people get more, some people get less, some people get different. However, God always gives everyone exactly what they need. And so when I look at what I have, and I look at Bob down the street and see what Bob has, and I say, I actually want more or different than what I have. I want what Bob has. What we sometimes don't realize is we're actually leveling an accusation against God. Actually, two. The first is when I look at Bob and I say, Bob's got too much. What I'm really saying is, God, you gave Bob too much. And when I say I want what Bob has, what I'm saying also is, God, you gave me too little. So covetousness is this thing where it's not just me saying, I want more, I want different. It's me saying, God, you got it wrong. And that's why Jesus says, be warned. When you start to compare yourself to others and you start to want what they have, you're actually leveling an accusation against God that he got it wrong. And then Jesus gives this really clarifying statement. He says, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. What Jesus is saying is, you are not what you have. Because often we think, whatever I have, that's what determines my value. If I don't have enough, then I am less than. If I have more than everybody else, I'm somehow better than them. Because often we equate our own value and our own worth with what we have, and you need to hear what Jesus is saying here. Your worth is not your net worth. What you have doesn't define who you are. And the reason this is such a problem for us is because this mindset of I need more or I don't have enough leads us away from contentment and leads us into a very bad place, because when contentment is absent, worry multiplies. If you can't be content with what you have, you are going to worry, even if you've got a lot. You know, the people who have a lot, they still worry. They worry about whether they can hold on to it. They worry about losing what they have. And they stress and they get anxious, and they're worried, how am I going to hold on to everything that I have? And the people who don't think they have enough also worry, because they say, where is the more going to come from? And the reality is, whether you think you have too much or whether you think you don't have enough, if you can't be content with what you have, you're going to worry. So if you want to live a life that is stress-free and anxiety-free and worry-free, one of the secrets of that is learning to be content with what you have. Not comparing yourself to others, not wondering why you don't have more, but rather to say, whatever it is that I need, God has given to me because He promised to provide all of my needs, and I can be content with what I have because it's what God has given me. I don't need to worry about getting more or holding on to what I have. And to kind of drive this point home, Jesus is going to do what He often does. He tells a parable. He gives us a story. This is what He says. And He told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. Pay attention to this word, to this phrase, right? Notice Jesus does not say a man made a lot of money for himself. He doesn't say there was a rich man who had earned a lot of money. He says the land produced. And what Jesus is saying is it was God who gave to this man. You understand, when a farmer grows stuff, right? They plant a seed, they water it, they fertilize it, they do the work. But at the end of the day, everything they do doesn't matter unless God makes it grow. And this is true in every part of our life. Whatever it is that we have, yes, it may be true that you worked for that and you worked hard and you made good decisions and you were wise, but at the end of the day, you have what you have because God gave it to you. Because there are some people out there who work just as hard as you, made just as good decisions as you, were just as wise as you, and they have less than you. And there are some people who work just as hard as you, made just as good of decisions as you, were just as wise as you, and they have more than you. Because why? Because God gives us all differently. And Jesus is driving this point home. It's the land that produced. It's God that gave. It's not this guy all on his own. But this guy doesn't understand that. He says, the land of a rich man produced plentifully, and he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. He's asking a question that we all have to ask. What do I do with my extra? Now, he's got a lot of extra. He's got more than he needs. And the reality for us is that we also have more than we need. We live in a place and we live in a time where we are overflowing with extra. Just drive around. You cannot drive 10 minutes in any direction without driving by one of these big storage facilities, right? Where there's all these storage. Why do we have those? Because people have so much extra they can't fit it in their house. Why is it that we now are building houses that have garages that are bigger than our last house? Because we have so much extra, we don't know what to do with it. When you walk through a house and you're looking to buy a new house, one of the first things you look at is how big are the closets. And the closets are getting bigger. Why? Because the closet is the room where we put all of our extra when we're not using it. We are full and overflowing of extra. And so just like this guy, we've got to ask the question, what do I do with my extra? Because God has prospered us. Well, there's three things that you can do with extra, right? You can spend it, you can save it, or you can sacrifice it, right? I can spend my extra. And by the way, there's nothing inherently right or wrong with any of these three, okay? Like, it's okay for me to spend some of my extra. So I can say, I'm going to spend some of my extra. That's okay. The problem is, if all I do is spend all of my extra, now I'm being wasteful. And that is wrong. I can save my extra. And there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's wise. Proverbs teaches in many places it's good to set a little bit aside so you have something if something happens. I can save my extra. But the problem here is, if all I do is save all of my extra, I've become a hoarder. And that is a problem. That is wrong. But what about sacrifice? Sacrifice is when I take my extra and give it to someone else. When I take my extra and I use it for the good of someone else. And just think about this. If you were to go to Jesus and say, Jesus, what should I do with my extra? How would he answer you? In fact, just look at his life. What does Jesus' life tell us about how we should use our extra? What does Jesus' death tell us about how we should use our extra? Because what Jesus' life and death teach us more than anything else is that Jesus valued sacrifice. In fact, Jesus lived to die. His whole purpose in coming to earth was to sacrifice himself so that we could have something we could never earn on our own, which is salvation, which is a relationship with God. Jesus' sacrifice defines him. And so I think if we were going to say to Jesus, what should I do with my extra? I think Jesus' first answer would be, you got to sacrifice some of it. Because the reality is the reason God gives us extra is so we can be generous to others. The reason God gives us extra is so that we can bless the people around us. Now, this guy in the parable doesn't get this, right? Look at how he solves the problem in verse 18. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. So the first thing he says is, I'm going to spend some of my extra. So I'm going to tear down my perfectly good barns, right? I'm going to tear those down so I can spend some of my extra to build bigger barns for myself. So he's going to spend. And then what is he going to do? He's going to save the rest. Now again, pay attention to Jesus is so smart. Pay attention to the details of the words that he uses here, because what he says is, there I will store some of my grain. No, that's not what he says. There I will store a little of my grain. No, he says, I'm going to store all of my grain. I'm going to hoard it all for myself. So he's going to spend and he's going to save, but he's not going to sacrifice any. What we have here is the picture of a person who trusts in himself. His faith is in himself. He believes that he is the one who can provide everything he needs. So he trusts in himself, he trusts in his wealth, he trusts in his possessions, he trusts in his ability, he trusts in his own wisdom. His faith is in himself. Now understand, everybody has faith. I know some people say, well, I'm not a person of faith. Yes, everybody has faith all of the time, but all faith also has an object. Okay? There's always an object of faith. Right now, all of you are exhibiting faith because you're sitting in a chair. And I was watching when you came in this morning. I didn't see anybody do a thorough examination of your chair before you sat down. Like, nobody was like pushing down on it, making sure it was okay. Nobody was like pushing it this way to see if it was going to hold them. I just need anybody to get down on all fours, look underneath, make sure everything looks structurally sound, pulling on the legs. Nobody did any of that. Y'all just came in and sat down because you have faith. The object of your faith was the chair and the person who made the chair. But you had faith. So everybody has faith, and there's always an object to your faith. Now, the big question in life is, where is your faith when it comes to providing the things you most need? And for this guy, his faith is in himself. He says, I am the only one who can provide what I need. What's he looking for? Well, he wants comfort. He wants convenience. He wants pleasure. He wants safety. That's why he says, look, I'm the one who can provide this. And what am I going to provide? I'm going to provide the opportunity to relax, eat, drink, and be merry. That's what I need. I need comfort, convenience, pleasure, and safety. And I can provide that for myself. And so I have faith in myself. Now, here's the problem. When our faith is in ourselves, what we do is we hold tightly to what we have. In fact, I would say the more I trust myself, the more tightly I hold what I have. Because when I'm trusting myself, my belief is it's what I have that's going to provide what I need. And so if I let go even of a little bit of what I have, I might not be able to provide what I need. And so I hold tightly to it. And here's a place for us to maybe ask ourselves a kind of a difficult question. Maybe do a little bit of deeper introspection here. If I'm the kind of person who never gives anything away, that reveals that I'm trusting myself and not God. If I'm the person who can't be generous with what I have, that's most likely because my faith is in me and not in God. You see, when my faith is in God, and I say, I believe that God will provide what I need. I believe that God has provided what I need and always will provide what I need. If I truly believe that, if that's the object of my faith, I don't need to hold tightly to what I have. Because whatever I have is what I need, and whatever I don't have or whatever I lose is what I didn't need, because God will always provide what I need. So, if my faith is in me, I hold tightly. If my faith is in Him, I'm open-handed. I'm willing to let go. And look at how God responds to this man in Jesus' parable. Verse 20. It says, "But God said to him, 'Fool, this night your soul is required of you.'" So what Jesus is saying is the guy's going to die. What Jesus wants us to understand is that death comes for all of us, right? And when we're measuring success on earth, we have to look at it in terms of when am I going to die? And what happens when I die? And it says this night your soul is required of you. You are going to die. And the things you have prepared, the bigger barns, the grain, the hoarding, the stuff you've trusted in. What Jesus is saying, everything that you've trusted in has failed you because none of it kept you alive. But he goes on, he says, the things you have prepared, whose will they be? This is one of my favorite statements of Jesus. Because what he's saying is you spent your whole life accumulating as much as you could, hoarding it, saving it, not letting go of it, holding tightly to it. Now who's got it? Now who does it belong to? See, here's a truth that you know, but you've probably not thought of it very often. You are going to give away everything you have. Right? You can't hold on to any of it. You can't take it with you. You are going to give away everything you have. The only question is, will you control how it's given away or who it's given to? And the only place you can control that is if you do it on this side of the grave, not the next. That's what Jesus is saying here. Jesus is saying, look, on the other side of the grave, all your stuff is still going away. You're still giving it away. You just don't have any control anymore. Who will it be? And then Jesus wraps it up by saying this, so is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. Jesus says, it is foolish to invest in this life and not invest in the next life. That statement he uses here is a little tough because it's not one we use ever in our language. He says to be rich toward God. And I think the best way to understand it is to see it as a directional statement. Jesus is helping us to understand that our lives are moving in a direction, always. You're always moving either toward God or away from Him. And what Jesus is pointing out to us is how you use what you have reveals the direction of your life. How you use what you have reveals if you're moving toward God or away from Him. Now understand this. Jesus is not condemning wealth here. Jesus is not saying nobody should be wealthy. In fact, if you read the Bible, all of Jesus' teaching, and you read the whole Bible cover to cover, you're not going to find a condemnation of wealth because it's okay to be wealthy. It's okay to have a lot. Sometimes God gives us a lot. But what Jesus is saying is what you do with your a lot matters. Do you use your wealth in a way that takes your life toward God or away from Him? This is really an investment question. So an investment is a choice to sacrifice now so I can be secure later. Does that make sense? So if I'm thinking about a financial investment, essentially what I say is I'm not going to spend the money now so that I can have a little bit more of it later. So now I'm going to say no to some things. Maybe I won't be as frivolous with my money. I won't drink as many coffees. I won't go out to eat as much. I won't spend as much on clothes. I'm going to say no now so I can say yes later. So later I'll have more money so I can say yes to the things I want to say yes to. Because a no now is always a yes to something later. And the reverse is true. If I say yes to things now, I'll have to say no later. Now this isn't just about money. This is about our health, right? If I say yes to exercise now, I'm saying no to a cardiac operation later. Okay? If I say yes to Bill's Donuts now here's the thing. We recently moved to a new house that is very close to Bill's Donuts. Like walking distance close to Bill's Donuts. And a lot of people have said to me, David, is that going to be a problem for you? And I say, no, it's actually not, and here's why. Because between me and Bill's Donuts is a cemetery. And it is a powerful reminder that the more I go there, the more likely I am to end up there a little more quickly. Right? Because the decisions I make today have an impact tomorrow. This is an investment question. Parents, your life is an investment in your children. The decisions you make are an investment in their future. And so if you say to me, David, what I really want for my kids is I want them to grow up to love Jesus. I want them to follow him for their whole lives. I want their faith to be strong. I will say to you, what investments are you making right now to make that happen? Are the things that you're saying no to, I'm just going to go there. No, we're not going to go to church this morning. We're all tired. Are the things that you're saying no to going to cause your kids to say yes to Jesus in the future? And are the things that you're saying yes to, yeah, we can watch this. This seems like an okay show. Are the things that you're saying yes to going to cause your kids to say no to the world and to sin in the future? You're making an investment in your children. Life is an investment all the time. The things you say yes to, the things you say no to today lead to yes and no's tomorrow. Jesus talked a lot about this principle. In fact, in Matthew 6, we have one of the most familiar passages where Jesus is talking about investments. He says this, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. That's investment language, right? Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. Jesus is saying, are you making investments in your life that are material or that are eternal? Are you investing in this world or the next? Because what Jesus is clearly saying is, look, we live in a material world, right? We are living in a material world. Even Madonna gets some things right. But in a material world, nothing lasts. That's why Jesus says that moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal, because nothing in a material world lasts. So are you investing in the stuff that's not going to last, or are you investing in what is going to last? And then Jesus says this, for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Jesus is actually saying here, how you use your extra will determine your spiritual growth. Now, sometimes we read this verse and in our minds we reverse it. And we think that what Jesus is saying is where your heart is, there your treasure will be. That's actually not what he's saying. He's actually giving us another one of these directional statements. He's saying wherever you put your treasure, that's where your heart is going to pursue. It's like a pirate who buries their treasure somewhere and then spends the rest of their life trying to get back to where it is. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart's going to be. Imagine you get a safety deposit box and you fill it with like family heirlooms and jewelry and maybe some cash and a bunch of things that are really valuable to you, and you take it to your local bank, and we'll just say your bank is a PNC bank, and you lock it there. And right next to your bank is a Fifth Third Bank. And one day you're driving down the road and you notice that the Fifth Third Bank is on fire. Your response is probably something like, oh man, I hope everybody's okay, and you keep on driving. Why? Because your heart's not there. But if your PNC bank is the one that's on fire, then you're stopping. You're like, somebody's got to put this fire out. We got to do something. I'm going in for my stuff, because that's where your heart is, because that's where your treasure is. This is what Jesus is saying. Where you put your treasure, that is the direction your heart is going to go. Do I want to pursue God with my heart? Then where am I investing my treasure? Do I want to pursue Jesus with my heart? Then where am I investing my treasure? Think about this in terms of contentment, all right? I want my heart to be content. I want to be the fisherman, right? I want to have a content heart. But sometimes the things we say are, I want to be content, but I'm just not ready to sacrifice. And what Jesus is saying is, if you're willing to sacrifice, your heart will become content. Because where I put my treasure is where my heart's going to run. Listen, the best way to store up heavenly treasure is to give my earthly treasure to my heavenly Father. To take those material things that won't last, that moths and rust corrupt, that thieves steal, to take that and give it to Him and let Him use it for His kingdom. Now, in just a minute, I'm going to wrap up by talking about 3 ways that you can invest in God's kingdom. All right? But before I do that, I want to give you just a couple of disclaimers. Okay? First disclaimer is this. You can invest in God's kingdom without giving money. All right? Sometimes the most important investments we make are things like the words we speak to others, the attitude that we have in front of others, the way we respond to suffering. These are all investments in God's kingdom. The way that we serve others, what we do with our time and our energy and our resources. This is how we invest in God's kingdom. You can invest in God's kingdom without giving money. Now, if money is a part of your extra, then that's probably something you ought to think about investing. But you can invest in God's kingdom without giving money. And secondly, you can invest in God's kingdom without giving to the gathering. Right? I really believe this. I don't care where you give your money. If you give your money somewhere other than the gathering, that's fine. I firmly believe that God will supply all of our needs and that God will always give us everything we need to do everything He wants us to do. And if at some point we don't have the money we think we need, that simply means that we don't know what we need to be doing. And so we'll go back to the drawing board and figure it out. So you can give to God's kingdom without giving to the gathering. In fact, we do that. Some of our giving is to nonprofits that are doing really good work in some inner city areas. Some of our giving is to missionaries that we know. Some of our family members are missionaries overseas. We give to that. Some of our giving goes to Bible translation projects. Some of our giving goes to church plants. So it's okay to give money that doesn't go to the gathering, all right? And having said that, I want to talk to you just for a second about what does happen when you give your money to the gathering. Because many of you do. Many of you have been extraordinarily generous with the gathering, and I want you to understand what happens to that money. Every Sunday, here in this building, there are over 100 kids, sometimes close to 150 kids, spread out all over the building who are learning about Jesus, who are being given opportunities to give their life to Jesus, who are having their foundations laid for a life of following Jesus. For several months now, we've had around 50 teenagers every Sunday morning who are here learning about our faith, learning how to get into the Bible for themselves. They're being prepared for the day they go out into a world that will not be friendly to their faith, and we want them to be ready for that. And that happens every Sunday here at the gathering. You saw a video this morning of Mike and Sarah talking about how the Gathering's Children Ministry has been such a powerful ally for them as they try to bring their children up to love Jesus. We saw a video 2 weeks ago of Lincoln, who's a young man in our church. He hasn't been here long, but God is doing amazing things in him. I follow him on Facebook, and so I see him post these pictures every week where he leads this young men's Bible study. And you see these pictures of this whole big gaggle of kids sitting around this table, and they're all excited, and they're reading their Bibles and following Jesus. And look, all of that happens because of your generosity. In the last 2 years, we've baptized over 100 people here. And every single one of those baptisms represents the story of life change. Someone has had their life changed by Jesus. Many of you have amazing life-changing stories of how Jesus has changed you, and all of that happens because of your generosity to the gathering. Because of what you give, we're able to give back to our community. And so we've gotten coats for kids and clothes for kids and shoes for kids. We've been able to support women's shelters. We've been able to support soup kitchens, homeless shelters, all these places that we're able to support because of your generosity. Many of you have invested your time and your resources and your energy at places like the Victory Project, which helps young men who are at risk make it through high school and launch their lives. Many of you have served at Family Promise, which is a place where a whole family can stay together while they get back on their feet and find their way back after some kind of financial disaster. Many of you are a part of our ministry in some of the Miamisburg elementary schools, where we're encouraging the teachers and investing in the kids. All of this happens because of all of your generosity. When we come in here on Sundays, we have this amazing space because 15, 20 years ago, a group of people were generous and they gave extra so that we could have this. And we come here today and we enjoy connecting with each other. And you go out into the lobby and you sense the life of all the relationships there. And we come in here and we have this opportunity to have powerful worship and practical teaching, all because of your generosity. God has chosen to do great things here. And the catalyst for that has been the generosity of his people. That's what happens when you give here. So let me talk to you just real quickly about 3 practical ways that you can invest in God's kingdom here at the gathering. Number 1, give a weekly offering. I don't know who said this, but it's a great statement that first we make our habits and then our habits make us. And the reality is that a weekly habit of giving to God is a powerful habit to teach you to trust God. Because every week you give a little bit to him, and shockingly, he still provides your needs. So I would challenge you, if you don't have a weekly habit of giving, what a great way to begin investing in his kingdom. And maybe just start with like $5 or $10 and say, I'm just going to give this much a week, and if God keeps meeting my needs, I'll keep giving. And then as you begin to discover that God does indeed meet your needs, maybe you can raise that money a little bit to 20 or 50 or whatever works for you. But this is a great habit to begin developing trust in God. The second thing you can do to invest is to join a team and serve. This isn't a financial investment. This is an energy. This is a time investment. The teams of volunteers we have here at the gathering is what makes the gathering work. You see some of them on Sundays in our kids area and with our youth, in our cafe, our host team that greets you. But there's also people who are in here during the week, taking care of the building, fixing things, cleaning things. All of that happens here, taking care of the grounds. All of that's a part of our teams. And we always need more volunteers. And if this is something you're saying, man, that sounds great, I should be a part of a team, I should invest that way, I'm not sure how to get started, let me make it easy for you this morning. On your connection card, write the words, I want to be on a team. And then write one more sentence that either starts with, here's what I'm really good at. Tell us what you're really good at. Or write a sentence that says, I'm really passionate about. Tell us what you're passionate about. Or write a sentence that says, I have experience in. Tell us what you have experience in. You write that down. Somebody from the gathering will get back with you this week, and we'll start to help you on this journey of finding a place to serve. Here's the third way that you can invest, is I want you to think and pray about making a 3-year above and beyond commitment. We're in this project right now to create more space. We're going to build some more space out that way. We're going to renovate this room. We're trying to create more space so that more people can be more connected to Jesus. In a couple of weeks, on the 24th, we're going to have what we call Commitment Sunday, and you're going to have the opportunity to make a 3-year commitment to say, here's what I want to give above and beyond what I already give to be part of this project. And as we get ready for that, I want to ask you to be praying about it. I want you to pray a couple of specific things. Pray that God will show you your extra. This is a little bit of a dangerous prayer. Say, God, show me my extra, because maybe there are extra things that you've given me that I haven't even noticed, that I've just taken for granted. But God, show me my extra. And then secondly, ask God to help get your heart ready to sacrifice. Like, God, what is it that I have that I can give back to you, that I can use to invest in your kingdom? And as you're praying that, I also want you to be thinking about, what does that amount look like? How much extra do I have a week that I could give to this? You know, maybe it's $10. So $10 a week for a year, that's going to be about $500 times 3, that's $1,500. My commitment will be that. Maybe for you it's $20 or $50 or $100 or $1,000, whatever it might be. What can I give each week above and beyond what I normally give to invest in this project? You know, for some of you, it might look like this. You might say, you know what, God, you've given me enough right now. So I'm going to put a pause on my lifestyle changes. I'm not going to increase the cost of my lifestyle at all for 3 years. And anything that's extra, unexpected that comes my way, I'm just going to give that back to you. So if I get an unexpected raise or an unexpected bonus or for some other reason unexpected money comes my way, I'm just passing that right back to you, not increasing my standard of living for 3 years so that I can invest in your kingdom. You know, when you make an investment like this, you're not investing in a building because this isn't about the building. You're really not even investing in the people who are here because you're here. This is an investment in the people who aren't here. Your friends and your neighbors, your co-workers, your family members who need to know Jesus, who don't know him yet. We want to create more space so that they can come here and feel comfortable and hear about the life-changing gospel that Jesus offers us. You're making an investment in the kids and the youth so that they can grow and they can have their own families and they can reinvest. And when you make a small investment like this, it's the kind of investment that Jesus can take and do something amazing with. Let me finish by reading to you from 2 Corinthians 9. It says, the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. And whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Do you see, this is investment language. Don't misunderstand this. What Paul is saying here, he is not saying if you give a little bit to the church, then you're going to get a lot of money in the mail. Right? He's not saying that. He's not saying that if you give a little bit now, you'll be blessed on this earth later. Now, you might. That might happen. That's not the promise, though. Right? What he's saying is this is an eternal investment. And if you make a small eternal investment now, when you get to eternity, the return will be small. And if you make a big eternal investment now, when you get to eternity, it'll be a big return. He says, whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly. Whoever sows bountifully will reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart. This is so cool. God is saying it's up to you. You need to make this decision. God's saying, I've given you everything you have. And God has generously given you so much extra. And now He's saying, look, I've given you all this. Now I want you to decide. This is up to you. Decide in your heart what you're going to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion. Please hear this. If you're thinking about giving and you're reluctant, you're not sure, don't give. Okay? If you're sitting here right now and you feel like I'm manipulating you or I'm compelling you, don't give. Please don't give. I do not want to answer to God for that. Okay? We don't give because we're compelled. We don't give reluctantly because why? Because God loves a cheerful giver. So if your story is that God has provided more than you need, that God has given you extra, that God has taken care of you, that God has saved you, whatever that may be. If that's your story and you're grateful to Him, and out of that gratefulness and out of that contentment, your generosity grows and you're like, I am ready to give cheerfully, that's when you're ready to give. My desire for you is that you discover contentment, right? The kind of contentment that the fisherman had. The kind of contentment that realizes that I will never have enough to make me content, but if I'm content, I will always have enough. That's what I want for you. But what I've learned from the Bible, and what I've learned from Jesus, and what I've learned from experience, is that if I want my heart to pursue contentment, then I need to put my sacrifice in eternity. Because that's where my heart will run, and that's where contentment comes from.